The ship appeared near Mars without warning. It was badly damaged, smoke and sparks coming from holes in its metal skin. The Earth Defense Satellite spotted it immediately and sent an alert to all military stations. Captain Dongwu received the message on his bridge and ordered his crew to move closer to the unknown vessel. The ship looked strange. It was shaped like a water droplet and made from materials that seemed almost alive, changing colors from blue to green as it drifted through space. Dongwu had never seen anything like it in his 20 years of service. His tactical officer, Jaemin, scanned the ship for weapons and found none. It was completely defenseless. When they got close enough, Dongwu tried to make contact. A weak signal came back. The voice was soft and musical, speaking in a language the computer needed several minutes to translate. The speaker was female and she sounded exhausted and frightened. She said her name was Hyunji, and that she was bringing the last survivors of her people to Earth. She begged for help. Dongwu ordered his crew to bring the damaged ship aboard their carrier vessel. When the doors opened and the Tavari emerged, the human crew stood in silence. The Tavari looked like humans mixed with ocean creatures. Their skin was smooth and pale blue, with patterns that glowed softly in the light. They had large eyes that seemed sad and tired. Many of them were injured, and all of them looked like they had not eaten properly in weeks. Dr. Bora, the ship's doctor, immediately went to work. She had studied alien biology, but had never treated anyone like the Tavari before. She learned quickly that they needed water constantly, and that their bodies were very fragile compared to humans. Many of the children were sick with infections. Bora and her team worked for hours to stabilize everyone. Hyunji was the healthiest of the survivors, but even she was weak. When she could finally speak properly, she told Dongwu the terrible story of what had happened to her people. The Kraith had come to their world 6 months ago. The Tavari had tried to negotiate peace, offering to share their resources and knowledge. The Kraith had laughed at them and attacked anyway. The Tavari were not warriors. They had never built weapons or trained soldiers. Their whole civilization believed that violence was wrong, and that all problems could be solved through talking and understanding. But the Kraith did not care about talking. They wanted the Tavari's planet for its minerals and its location near important trade routes. The invasion lasted 3 months. The Kraith ships destroyed cities from orbit. Millions died in the first week. The Tavari tried to evacuate as many people as possible, but the Kraith hunted down the refugee ships. One by one, they were destroyed. Hyunji's ship was one of only 5 that escaped. Of those 5, hers was the only one that made it to Earth. The others had been caught and destroyed along the way. Dongwu listened to this story with growing anger. He had seen war before, but this was different. This was not a fight between armies. This was genocide. He promised Hyunji that he would take her to Earth's leaders, and that they would help if they could. 3 days later, Hyunji stood in front of the United Earth Council in Geneva. The room was large and filled with representatives from every nation on Earth and every colony in the solar system. Secretary General Ki-hoon sat at the center, a serious man with gray hair and tired eyes. Defense Minister Sun Woo sat beside him, along with dozens of other officials. Hyunji showed them recordings from her homeworld. The images were horrifying. Beautiful cities reduced to rubble, ships full of refugees being blown apart, children crying for their parents. The council members watched in silence, and many of them looked away from the screens. When the presentation ended, Hyunji made her request. She did not ask for soldiers or weapons. She knew the Tavari were finished as a fighting force. She only asked for a place where her people could live safely until they could find a new world to call home. There were only 200,000 Tavari left alive in the entire galaxy. She was asking Earth to protect them. The debate that followed was heated. Some council members argued that Earth could not afford to get involved. The Kraith were powerful, and making them angry could bring war to human space. Others said that Earth had plenty of resources in empty worlds where the Tavari could live without causing problems. Ki-hoon was cautious. He worried about the consequences of protecting refugees from such a dangerous enemy. Sun Woo disagreed strongly. She said that if Earth turned away people in need, then all of humanity's talk about justice and compassion meant nothing. The person who changed the debate was Admiral Young Mi. She was the oldest person in the room, a woman who had commanded Earth's fleets for 30 years. She rarely spoke in council meetings, but when she did, everyone listened. Young Mi told a story from her childhood. When she was 10 years old, her country had been torn apart by civil war. Her family had fled across the border into a neighboring nation, carrying only what they could hold in their hands. They had nothing to offer and no way to repay kindness. But the people of that nation had taken them in anyway, given them food and shelter, and helped them start a new life. Young Me said that she remembered what it felt like to be helpless and afraid. She remembered the kindness of strangers who owed her nothing, and she said that if Earth turned away the Tavari now, it would be betraying everything that made humanity worth defending in the first place. The vote was close, but it passed. Earth would give sanctuary to the Tavari. They would be settled on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons where humans had built underwater cities that would be perfect for the aquatic Tavari. Earth would provide protection and support until the Tavari could stand on their own again. Hyunji wept when she heard the decision. She had expected rejection. Almost every other species she had contacted had turned her away, too afraid of the Kraith to help. But humanity had said yes. The celebration did not last long. 5 days after the Council's decision, 3 Kraith warships entered the solar system. They were massive vessels, dark and angular, covered in weapons. They moved past Mars without slowing and sent a message to Earth. The Kraith commander called himself Overlord Kreth. His voice was harsh and filled with clicking sounds that the translator struggled to handle. He said that the Tavari were property of the Kraith Dominion and must be surrendered immediately. He gave Earth 48 hours to comply. If the humans refused, there would be consequences. Dongwu was sent to meet the Kraith ships with a small escort of frigates. When he got close enough to see the enemy vessels clearly, he understood why so many species feared them. The ships were enormous, easily 3 times the size of Earth's largest warships. Their weapons could probably destroy a city with a single shot, but Dongwu did not back down. He transmitted Earth's response clearly and firmly. The Tavari were under human protection now. Earth would not surrender them. If the Kraith wanted to take them, they would have to go through the entire human fleet first, Kreth laughed. It was an ugly sound, full of contempt. He said that humans were foolish children playing with toys they did not understand. He said the Kraith had destroyed civilizations far older and stronger than Earth. He promised that if humans interfered, they would learn what real war meant. Then the Kraith ships turned around and left the solar system. But everyone knew they would be back. This was not a retreat. It was a promise of violence to come. On Earth, Admiral Young Mi called an emergency meeting of all military commanders. She told them to prepare for war. Every ship would be armed and ready. Every defense platform would be activated. Every soldier would be trained for what was coming. Meanwhile, on the damaged Tavari ship, Hyunji looked out at the blue-green planet below. She had asked for shelter and humanity had said yes. But now she wondered if that yes would cost these kind strangers everything they had. She wondered if she had brought death to the very people who had offered to save her. The journey to Europa took 3 weeks. The Tavari traveled in human transport ships, their damaged vessel left behind for study. During the trip, Dr. Bora spent every day with the refugees, learning about their biology and culture. She discovered that the Tavari could breathe both water and air, though they were most comfortable in water. They ate mostly plants and small sea creatures, and their bodies needed to stay wet or they became sick. Europa was perfect for them. The moon had been transformed over 50 years by human engineers. Beneath its icy surface was a vast ocean, kept warm by heat from Jupiter's gravity. Humans had built cities on the ocean floor, great domes of transparent metal where people could live and work. The water was clean and full of earth fish that had adapted to the alien environment. When the Tavari first saw their new home, many of them cried. The underwater cities reminded them of the world they had lost. Children pressed their faces against the windows of the transport ships, pointing at the schools of fish and the glowing lights of the human settlements below. The human colonists on Europa had been warned about the refugees. Most of them were welcoming. They helped the Tavari find housing and brought them food. Some families offered to share their homes until new buildings could be constructed. But not everyone was happy about the newcomers. A politician named Han Sol began speaking against the Tavari. He said that Europa did not have enough resources for 200,000 new residents. He claimed that the aliens would take jobs from human workers, and that their strange ways would corrupt human culture. His speeches attracted followers, people who were afraid of change or who blamed the Tavari for the coming war with the Kraith. Han Sol organized protests in New Geneva, the capital city of Europa. Hundreds of people marched through the streets carrying signs that said the Tavari should leave. Some protesters became violent, throwing rocks at Tavari homes and threatening families. The local police had to intervene several times to prevent serious injuries. Hyun-ji tried to calm the situation. She met with human leaders and explained that her people wanted nothing more than to live peacefully and contribute to their new community. She offered to have Tavari workers help with construction projects and farming. She suggested cultural exchange programs where humans and Tavari could learn from each other. The Tavari themselves were divided about how to respond to the hostility. Elder Sangho, who had been a religious leader on their homeworld, insisted that the Tavari should keep to themselves. He said they should maintain their traditional ways and not become too dependent on human charity. He feared that if they mixed too much with humans, they would lose their identity. But younger Tavari like Hyun-ji disagreed. They argued that isolation would only make things worse. If the Tavari wanted to be accepted, they needed to show that they could be valuable members of the community. They needed to work alongside humans, learn human languages and customs, and prove that they were not a burden. Despite the tensions, progress was made. Dr. Bora started a program where Tavari and human children attended school together. The young ones adapted quickly, making friends across species lines. Tavari children taught human kids how to swim like dolphins, while human children shared their games and stories. The adults found common ground in work. Tavari engineers had knowledge of organic technology that fascinated human scientists. They could grow buildings from living materials that repaired themselves when damaged. They knew how to create lights using bioluminescent organisms that needed no electricity. Human engineers were amazed by these techniques and eager to learn. In return, humans taught the Tavari about advanced energy systems, artificial intelligence, and space travel. The exchange of knowledge benefited both species. Together, they designed new types of habitats that combined the best of both technologies. But the shadow of the Kraith hung over everything. Reports came in from Earth's intelligence network, showing that the enemy was building a massive fleet. Spy satellites detected ships gathering at the edge of Kraith space. Military analysts estimated that at least 50 warships were being prepared for an invasion. Admiral Young Mi knew that Earth's fleet could not win a direct battle against such numbers. The Kraith had been fighting wars for centuries and had technology specifically designed for destruction. Earth's military was strong, but it was built for defense and peacekeeping, not for total war. Lieutenant Jae-min proposed a different strategy. Instead of trying to defeat the Kraith in open space, humanity should turn the Jupiter system into a fortress. They could place automated weapons platforms throughout the area, hide missiles on moons and asteroids, and create layers of defense that would make any attack incredibly costly. The plan was called Operation Bulwark. It required enormous resources and the cooperation of every human colony in the solar system. Ships that normally carried cargo were converted to ley mines. Factories that made civilian goods were retooled to produce weapons. Every able-bodied person was put to work building defenses. The Tavari volunteered to help. They had no weapons of their own, but they had other skills. Tavari biologists developed living mines that could move and hide themselves. These organic weapons could sense approaching ships and attack at the right moment. They could even reproduce slowly, creating more mines over time. Hyun-ji worked alongside Captain Dong-woo to coordinate the construction efforts. She was impressed by how efficiently humans could organize such a massive project. Dong-woo was equally impressed by the Tavari's creativity and their willingness to contribute despite their own trauma and exhaustion. One evening, after a long day of work, Hyun-ji invited Bora to attend a Tavari ceremony. It was called the Naming of Stars, a tradition where refugees honored their dead by dedicating stars to them. The ceremony took place in a darkened room with a holographic display of the night sky. One by one, Tavari survivors stood and spoke the names of loved ones they had lost. After each name, a star in the display would glow brighter and be marked with that person's name. By the end of the ceremony, thousands of stars were shining for the dead. Bora was deeply moved. She had never seen grief expressed so beautifully. She told Dong-woo about the ceremony, and he immediately ordered a similar memorial for human soldiers who had died in past conflicts. The gesture touched both communities and helped bring them closer together. But not all news was good. Hansol's movement grew stronger. One of his followers, a young man named Tae-young, became radicalized by the politician's speeches. Tae-young believed that the Tavari were parasites who would destroy human society. He decided to take action. Late one night, Tae-young sneaked into a Tavari residential section carrying explosives. He planned to destroy one of the habitat modules and kill everyone inside. But security cameras spotted him, and human guards intercepted him before he could set off the bomb. The incident shocked both communities. Secretary General Ki-hoon gave a speech condemning the attack and promising that anyone who harmed the Tavari would be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. He reminded humanity that they had made a promise to protect these refugees, and breaking that promise would dishonor everything Earth stood for. Han Sol's political career ended after the bombing attempt. Most of his supporters abandoned him once they saw where his rhetoric led. The majority of Europa's human population rallied around the Tavari, ashamed that one of their own had tried to hurt innocent people. As the weeks passed, the defenses grew stronger. The asteroid belt became a maze of hidden weapons. Jupiter's moons were covered with missile batteries and sensor arrays. The space between Mars and Jupiter was monitored by thousands of satellites that would detect any approaching ships. Then, 5 months after the Tavari's arrival, a small Kraith probe entered the solar system. It moved quickly, scanning everything it could find before human ships could intercept it. The probe transmitted data back to the Kraith fleet and then self-destructed when human missiles got too close. Admiral Young-mi knew what this meant. The Kraith had been studying Earth's defenses. They knew where the Tavari were and how many ships humans had. The invasion would come soon. She stood on the bridge of her flagship and looked out at the construction crews still working on the defense platforms. They were running out of time, but she was proud of what humanity had accomplished. In just 5 months, they had turned the Jupiter system into the most heavily defended place in human space. On Europa, Hyun-ji gathered the Tavari community for an assembly. She told them that war was coming and that they needed to be prepared. She thanked them for their hard work and their courage. She reminded them that humanity was fighting for them, and they must never forget that sacrifice. The Tavari responded with determination. If humans were willing to die for them, then they would do everything possible to make that sacrifice worthwhile. They would work harder, contribute more, and prove that they deserved the protection they had been given. The alarm started at dawn. Every sensor in the solar system screamed warnings at the same moment. The Kraith had arrived, and they had brought an army. 47 warships emerged from hyperspace near Neptune. They were massive vessels, each one bristling with weapons and covered in dark armor. At their center was the largest ship anyone had ever seen, a brutal piece of military engineering called the Reaper's Claw. It was commanded by Overlord Kreth himself. Admiral Young-mi was on the bridge of her flagship when the news came. She had been expecting this moment for months, but seeing the actual size of the enemy fleet made her stomach tighten. Earth's entire military had only 32 warships. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but Young-mi had not spent 6 months preparing to surrender. She gave the order to activate all defenses. Throughout the solar system, automated platforms powered up. Hidden mines activated their sensors. Every human warship moved to its assigned position. The trap was set. Overlord Kreth sent a message that was broadcast to every screen in human space. His face appeared insectoid and terrifying, with mandibles that clicked as he spoke. He offered one final chance for surrender. Give up the Tavari within 24 hours or watch your civilization burn. The United Earth Council met in emergency session. Some members wanted to negotiate to find some middle ground that might avoid war. But Admiral Young-mi shut down that discussion immediately. Earth had given its word to protect the Tavari. Breaking that promise now would mean that humanity's word meant nothing. Secretary General Ki-hoon transmitted Earth's response personally. His message was simple and clear. The Tavari are under our protection. We will not surrender them. If you attack all of humanity, and we will defend ourselves. Kreth's response was laughter. He called humans foolish and weak. He said they would learn what real power meant. Then he ordered his fleet to advance. On Europa, the Tavari watched the human preparations with fear and wonder. They saw warships moving into defensive formations around Jupiter. They watched as human soldiers loaded weapons and checked equipment. Many Tavari wept, knowing that people were about to die because of them. Hyun-ji stood with Dr. Bo-ra in an observation room, looking up through the ice at the stars above. She felt crushing guilt. These humans barely knew her people, yet they were willing to fight and die to protect them. Bora put a hand on her shoulder and said that this was humanity's choice freely made. The Tavari had done nothing wrong by asking for help. The first battle happened in the asteroid belt. The Kraith fleet moved forward confidently, not expecting serious resistance. That confidence cost them dearly. As the Kraith ships entered the belt, thousands of mines suddenly activated. Explosions blossomed across space like deadly flowers. 3 Kraith cruisers were destroyed in the first minute. 4 more were heavily damaged. The Tavari biomines proved especially effective, moving to attach themselves to enemy hulls before detonating. Automated defense drones swarmed out of hiding places among the asteroids. They were small and fast, almost impossible to hit. Each drone carried a single powerful missile. Working in groups, they overwhelmed the Kraith point defense systems and struck at vulnerable spots. Captain Dongwu led a strike force of frigates in a hit-and-run attack on the Kraith supply ships. Using stealth technology developed with Tavari help, his ships approached undetected and launched a devastating missile barrage. 2 supply vessels exploded and a third was left drifting and burning. The Kraith gave chase, but Dongwu led them deeper into the asteroid belt where more traps waited. Ships that pursued too eagerly found themselves surrounded by mines or ambushed by hidden weapons platforms. It was like fighting shadows. Overlord Kreth was furious. He had expected an easy victory, but humans were proving to be far more dangerous than he had anticipated. He regrouped his fleet and pushed forward more carefully, using screening ships to detect mines and drones to clear the way. The main battle began near Callisto, one of Jupiter's larger moons. The human fleet met the Kraith in open combat, and space became a hell of fire and metal. Admiral Young Mi commanded from her flagship, directing the battle with calm precision. She rotated damaged ships out of the fight and brought fresh ones in. She used every trick she knew, feinting attacks to draw enemies out of position, concentrating fire on vulnerable targets, always staying one step ahead. Human pilots flew with desperate courage. Fighter craft darted between massive warships targeting weapon systems and engines. Many pilots knew they would not survive, but they fought anyway. Every enemy gun they destroyed was one less threat to their homes. Lieutenant Jae-min coordinated the defensive positions with brilliant tactical awareness. He anticipated enemy movements and repositioned forces to counter them. When the Kraith tried to flank the human line, he had ships waiting. When they concentrated fire on one sector, he reinforced it with reserves. But the Kraith had numbers on their side. Slowly, inevitably, they pushed forward. Human ships fell one by one. Defense platforms were destroyed. The Kraith were taking heavy losses, but they were getting closer to Europa. Overlord Kreth sent a taunting message to Admiral Young Mi. He promised that the Tavari would watch their human protectors die before being dragged back to Kraith space in chains. He said that humanity's compassion had become its doom. Young Mi did not respond with words. She responded with action. She approved Jae-min's most desperate plan yet, a direct assault on the Reaper's Claw itself. If they could destroy or disable the flagship, it might throw the entire Kraith fleet into confusion. Dongwu volunteered to lead the attack. He assembled a squadron of the fastest ships in the fleet, loaded them with every weapon they could carry, and prepared for what might be a one-way mission. Before launching, he recorded a message for his family, telling them he loved them and was proud to fight for something worth dying for. The attack force charged straight at the Kraith flagship. They took terrible losses immediately. 3 ships were destroyed in the first 30 seconds. 2 more were crippled and had to retreat. But the survivors kept going, weaving through enemy fire with suicidal bravery. Dongwu's ship, the Vigilant, led the final push. They broke through the defensive screen and got close enough to launch torpedoes at point-blank range. The weapons struck true, tearing through the Reaper's Claw's armor and detonating inside its hull. Secondary explosions rippled through the flagship. Fires erupted across its surface. The massive vessel began to list, its engines failing. Overlord Kreth barely escaped, transferring his command to another ship as his flagship died around him. With their flagship destroyed and their commander shaken, the Kraith fleet lost cohesion. Some ships continued to fight, but others began to pull back. Kreth, furious and humiliated, ordered a general retreat. The battle was over. Humanity had won, but the cost was terrible. 18 warships had been destroyed. Thousands of personnel were dead. Many more were wounded. The space around Jupiter was littered with debris and bodies. Dongwu's ship limped back to Europa, its hull torn and its systems failing. When it docked, he was met by cheering crowds of both humans and Tavari. Hyunji was there, tears streaming down her face. She tried to thank him, but words failed her. Dongwu simply embraced her and said that protecting the innocent was what humans did. Admiral Youngmi held a memorial service for the fallen. She spoke of their courage and sacrifice. She said that they had died defending the principle that the strong must protect the weak, that refugees deserve safety, and that promises must be kept no matter the cost. The Tavari attended the service in massive numbers. They had never seen anything like human military honors. The precision, the solemnity, the respect shown to the dead moved them deeply. Many Tavari swore that day that they would never forget what humanity had done for them. In the days after the battle, humans and Tavari worked together to recover bodies and repair damage. The two species had been brought together by desperation, but they were being forged into something stronger by shared sacrifice. The Tavari were no longer just refugees. They were part of the community now, bound to humanity by blood and fire. But everyone knew this was not the end. The Kraith had retreated, but they would not give up. Overlord Kreth was alive and burning with desire for revenge. The next attack would come eventually, and it would be even more terrible than the first. In the months after the battle, Europa transformed. What had begun as a temporary refugee camp became something more permanent and beautiful. The Tavari no longer lived in emergency shelters. They built real homes, designed with both human and Tavari aesthetics, creating a unique style that belonged to both species. The collaboration between humans and Tavari deepened in ways no one had anticipated. Tavari scientists shared their knowledge of biotechnology, teaching humans how to grow living structures that could repair themselves. Human engineers showed the Tavari how to work with metals and energy systems. Together, they created innovations neither species could have achieved alone. Dr. Bora led a research team that developed a new type of defense system. They called them Guardian drones. These were small, intelligent machines enhanced with Tavari organic technology. They could learn from experience, adapt to new threats, and even replicate themselves slowly over time. Thousands of these drones were deployed throughout the solar system, creating a defense network that grew stronger every day. Captain Dongwu, promoted to admiral after his heroism in the battle, oversaw the construction of a massive space station orbiting Europa. The station was called Unity, and it served as both a military command center and a symbol of cooperation. Half of its crew were human, half were Tavari. Officers from both species worked side by side, learning each other's languages and customs. Ambassador Hyunji was named co-governor of Europa, sharing leadership with a human named Governor Minseo. Together, they worked to ensure that both communities thrived. Schools taught both human and Tavari history. Restaurants served food from both cultures. Festivals celebrated holidays from two worlds. Children born on Europa after the Tavari arrived grew up knowing both species equally. They played together, studied together, and thought nothing strange about having friends who looked different from them. These children represented the future, a generation that belonged fully to neither species but to both. But the military remained vigilant. A permanent fleet called the Guardian Fleet was stationed around Jupiter. These warships patrolled constantly, ready to respond to any threat. The flagship was a newly constructed dreadnought called the Sentinel, designed with input from both human and Tavari engineers. It was faster and more powerful than any ship humanity had built before. Lieutenant Jamin, now promoted to commander, served as the executive officer of the Sentinel. He trained new officers in the tactics that had won the first battle. He made sure everyone understood that they were not just defending Europa. They were defending a principle, that compassion and strength could coexist. The presence of the warships was reassuring but also sobering. Every Tavari who looked up and saw those massive vessels in orbit was reminded of the cost of their safety. Human crews had died so that Tavari families could sleep peacefully. That debt could never truly be repaid, but the Tavari were determined to try. The Tavari contributed in every way they could. They worked in factories building defense equipment. They served in medical facilities treating wounded soldiers. They used their biological expertise to develop new technologies that benefited both species. They were no longer passive refugees. They were active partners in their own defense. One young Tavari named Subin became famous throughout the solar system. She had lost her entire family in the Kraith invasion and arrived on Europa as an orphan. A human family adopted her, and she grew up speaking both languages fluently. When she came of age, she joined the military and became a fighter pilot, one of the first Tavari to do so. Subin's story inspired many others. If she could overcome such trauma and contribute to the defense of their new home, then others could too. More Tavari volunteered for military service, for scientific research, for any role that would help protect the community they had come to love. But troubling news arrived from distant space. Intelligence reports indicated that the Kraith had not given up. Overlord Kreth, humiliated by his defeat, was gathering allies. He was forming a coalition with other aggressive species, all of them united by a desire to punish humanity for its defiance. The Kraith propaganda machine worked overtime, spreading lies about Earth. They claimed that humans were dangerous expansionists who threatened galactic stability. They said that sheltering the Tavari was just the first step in a plan to dominate other species. Some neutral civilizations, afraid of being targeted, began to distance themselves from Earth. Secretary General Ki-hoon decided to fight back with truth. He and Ambassador Hyun-ji embarked on a diplomatic tour, visiting neutral systems and telling their story. They showed evidence of the Kraith's unprovoked aggression against the Tavari. They explained that Earth had only acted in self-defense and humanitarian concern. The tour had mixed results. Some species were sympathetic and offered quiet support. A few even agreed to provide intelligence about Kraith movements, but many remained fearful, too intimidated by Kraith power to risk association with Earth. Still, the tour achieved one important goal. It formed the basis for a coalition of species who opposed Kraith expansionism. On Europa, life continued with a strange mixture of normalcy and tension. People went to work, children attended school, families gathered for meals. But everyone knew that another war was coming. The question was not if, but when. Admiral Young-mi, now elderly but still commanding, spent her days planning for the next battle. She studied reports from across the galaxy, looking for any advantage. She knew that the Kraith would come with overwhelming force next time. They would not underestimate humanity again. Dr. Bora and Ambassador Hyun-ji became close friends during this time. They wrote a book together about their experiences, detailing the challenges and rewards of interspecies cooperation. The book became popular across human space, inspiring other communities to be more welcoming to differences. One evening, Hyun-ji and Bora sat together watching the sunset through Europa's ice. The sky above showed distant stars and the massive form of Jupiter dominating the horizon. Hyun-ji spoke about her guilt, the feeling that so many humans had died because of her people. Bora reminded her that humans had chosen this path freely. No one had forced them to protect the Tavari. They had done it because it was right, because it reflected the values they wanted to define their civilization. The Tavari were not a burden, but a reminder of why those values mattered. On the anniversary of the Tavari's arrival, a massive ceremony was held in New Geneva. Tens of thousands of people attended, both human and Tavari. Admiral Young-mi gave a speech that was broadcast throughout the solar system. She spoke of the journey they had all been on together. She acknowledged the sacrifices that had been made and honored those who had fallen. She declared that the Tavari were not guests or refugees anymore. They were citizens, equal members of a shared community, and as long as she drew breath, the warships would stand watch over their home. The crowd erupted in cheers. Humans and Tavari embraced each other, celebrating not just survival but something more, the creation of a truly united society. They had proven that two species from different worlds could come together and build something beautiful. But even as they celebrated, sensors at the edge of the solar system detected something troubling. Multiple hyperspace signatures, far more than the first invasion. The Kraith were returning and they were bringing friends. Admiral Dongwu received the alert on his command pad during the celebration. He looked at the data and felt his heart sink. Over 100 ships were heading toward Earth. This was not just an invasion. This was an attempt at total destruction. He quietly informed Admiral Young-mi, who read the report without changing expression. She had known this day would come. She activated the emergency protocols, and within minutes, every military unit in the solar system was on high alert. The celebration continued, but the military commanders began to slip away, one by one. They had preparations to make. The greatest battle in human history was about to begin, and this time the stakes were absolute. If they lost, both humans and Tavari would face extinction or slavery. On the bridge of the Sentinel, Commander Jae-min looked at the tactical display showing the approaching enemy fleet. He thought about everything that had been built on Europa, all the friendships and partnerships, all the children who had been born into this new mixed society. All of it would be destroyed if they failed. He turned to his crew and saw determination in their eyes, both human and Tavari faces looking back at him. They knew what was coming. They knew the odds. But they would fight anyway, because some things were worth dying for. Home was one of them, family was another, and the promise to protect those who could not protect themselves was perhaps the most important of all. The enemy fleet was the largest armada ever assembled against humanity. 120 warships emerged from hyperspace at multiple points around the solar system. The Kraith had brought allies, the Vexar Collective, a cybernetic hive mind species, and the Scaran hegemony, brutal reptilian warriors. Together, they surrounded Earth's defenses like a closing fist. Overlord Kreth transmitted his ultimatum from a new flagship even larger than the destroyed Reaper's Claw. This time, there would be no mercy. Surrender the Tavari and submit to Kraith authority, or face total annihilation. He gave humanity 12 hours to decide. Admiral Young-mi stood on the bridge of Unity Station and looked at the tactical display. Red markers representing enemy ships surrounded them from every direction. Any normal military commander would see this situation as hopeless. But Young-mi had not survived 50 years of service by giving up when things looked bad. She activated a secure communication channel and spoke a single code word. Across the solar system, ships began appearing from hiding spots in the asteroid belt, behind moons and in the shadow of Jupiter itself. These were not human ships. They were allies, species who had suffered under Kraith aggression and had quietly agreed to help Earth. The Orvathi brought fast cruisers and long-range missiles. The Thryn contributed heavily armored battleships. A dozen smaller species sent whatever they could spare. Together they evened the odds significantly. The Kraith had expected to outnumber Earth 3-1. Now the numbers were almost equal. Secretary General Ki-hoon transmitted Earth's response not just to the Kraith, but to the entire galaxy. He declared that humanity would never surrender those under its protection. He called on all free species to recognize that the Kraith coalition represented tyranny, and that standing together was the only way to defeat it. The battle began at multiple points simultaneously. The Kraith tried to overwhelm Earth's defenses through sheer numbers, attacking from all sides. But the Guardian drones that Dr. Bora had developed proved their worth. They adapted to enemy tactics faster than living pilots could, learning and evolving with each engagement. Admiral Dongwu commanded the Sentinel at the forefront of the fight. His ship carved through enemy formations, its weapons enhanced by Tavari biotechnology proving devastatingly effective. Commander Jae-min coordinated fleet movements with brilliant precision, always staying one step ahead of enemy strategies. The battle raged for 3 days without pause. Ships burned and exploded. Brave pilots made sacrifices to save their comrades. The space around Jupiter became a graveyard of twisted metal and debris, but neither side would yield. On the third day, something unprecedented happened. The Tavari, who had always been pacifists, made a collective decision. They could not stand by while others died for them. Ambassador Hyunji addressed her people and asked for volunteers to join the fight. Thousands responded. They could not crew warships or fire massive weapons, but they could pilot small, agile craft enhanced with their biological technology. These ships were almost invisible to sensors and could slip through enemy defenses undetected. Subin, the young Tavari who had become a fighter pilot, led the first squadron. They flew deep into enemy territory, targeting command ships and supply vessels. The Tavari pilots knew Kraith ship designs intimately from years of being hunted. They knew every weakness, every vulnerable spot. The turning point came when Subin identified a critical junction in the Kraith flagship's defensive network. If that junction could be destroyed, the entire shield system would collapse. But it was buried deep inside the ship's structure. impossible to reach with conventional weapons. Subin made her choice. She armed every explosive on her tiny craft and accelerated toward the flagship. Human commanders screamed at her to pull back, but she ignored them. She thought about her lost family, about the humans who had given her a home, about all the children on Europa who deserved to grow up in peace. Her ship struck the junction at full speed. The explosion was small, but it was in exactly the right place. The Kraith flagship's shields flickered and died. Human torpedoes, which had been unable to penetrate before, now struck home. The massive vessel began to break apart. Subin's sacrifice became a rallying cry. Other Tavari pilots followed her example, not with suicide runs but with incredible bravery and skill. They dismantled the Kraith formation piece by piece, always striking where the enemy was weakest. Meanwhile, Admiral Dongwu led a coordinated strike on the Vexar command nexus. The Vexar operated as a hive mind, and destroying their central hub would paralyze their entire fleet. It was heavily defended, but the combined human-alien coalition broke through. When the nexus exploded, 30 Vexar ships suddenly became uncoordinated and confused. Commander Jamin immediately exploited the chaos, directing forces to isolate and destroy Scaran vessels that had been left exposed. The Kraith coalition began to crumble. Ships that had been coordinating perfectly now fought as individuals. Some tried to retreat, others fought on with desperate fury, but the momentum had shifted irreversibly. Overlord Kreth, watching his grand fleet disintegrate, finally ordered a full retreat. But Admiral Youngmi had waited 2 years for this moment. She would not let him escape again. The pursuit was merciless. Human and allied ships hunted down the fleeing Kraith, destroying them or forcing them to surrender. Kreth's ship was boarded by a team led by human marines and Tavari commandos working together. The Overlord was captured alive and dragged from his command chair in chains. His reign of terror was over. The victory was total, but the cost was staggering. Earth had lost many ships and thousands of brave people. The Tavari mourned their fallen, especially Subin, whose heroism had turned the tide. Her name would be remembered forever. In the days after the battle, the solar system slowly returned to peace. Recovery teams worked to clear debris and rescue survivors. Memorial services were held for the dead of all species. The grief was deep, but so was the pride. They had stood together and won. The galactic community took notice of what had happened. Earth's willingness to fight for refugees and its ability to forge alliances earned respect across known space. The United Earth Alliance received an invitation to join the Galactic Council, the first time humanity had been offered such recognition. Overlord Kreth was tried for war crimes before an interstellar tribunal. The evidence against him was overwhelming. He was sentenced to life imprisonment on a remote facility where he could never threaten anyone again. The Kraith Dominion, leaderless and broken, sued for peace. On Europa, life blossomed in ways no one had imagined. The colony grew larger and more beautiful. New buildings rose, designed with both human and Tavari influences, creating a unique architectural style. The underwater gardens expanded, filled with plants from both Earth and the lost Tavari homeworld. The Tavari were no longer refugees. They were citizens with full rights and responsibilities. Many served in government, in the military, in schools and hospitals. They had proven themselves worthy of the sanctuary they had been given, not through any debt or obligation, but through their courage and contribution. Dr. Bora was appointed director of a new institute for interspecies studies. Her research into cooperation between different species attracted scientists from across the galaxy. Ambassador Hyunji served as senior advisor, continuing her lifelong work of building bridges between worlds. Admiral Dongwu retired from active duty after the war. He spent his remaining years teaching at the Strategic Defense Academy, training young officers from multiple species. He taught them tactics and strategy, but more importantly, he taught them about honor, compassion, and the responsibility that came with power. The Guardian fleet remained on station around Jupiter, a permanent reminder that freedom required vigilance. The warships were no longer just weapons of war. They had become symbols of a promise kept, of a civilization that valued protection over conquest. Every year, on the anniversary of the Tavari's arrival, a ceremony was held in New Geneva. Both species gathered to remember the fallen and celebrate the living. It was a day of mixed emotions, grief for what was lost, gratitude for what was gained and hope for the future. Admiral Young Mi, in her final public appearance before retirement, spoke to a crowd of hundreds of thousands. Her voice was old but strong. She said that humanity had not sought to be heroes. They had simply made a promise and kept it no matter the cost. The warships in orbit were not symbols of aggression, but of commitment. They stood guard over a home built on compassion and defended with courage. Decades later, historians would look back on the Tavari crisis as the moment humanity became a major galactic power. But they earned that position not through conquest or intimidation, but through the simple act of offering shelter to those who had nowhere else to go. In the central plaza of New Geneva, a statue was erected. It showed a human and a Tavari standing side by side, looking up at the stars together. At the base of the statue were carved words that had become humanity's creed, words that captured everything they had fought for. We asked for shelter. They built us a home and protected it with warships.